This is Hannah Renan.
And I'm Christina Brown.
And you are listening to Two Moms and a Couch podcast. Today, we are actually talking about screen time versus no screen time. I think when we originally envisioned this topic, we were talking about like for our kids, but I think we should expand it and talk about it in general. We can talk about for kids, but also for adults as well, because I know so this is how we came onto this topic. We were talking about something else. I think one of the other episodes we talked about, I think we were talking about overwhelm, and we talked about how we manage that. And Christina, you had said that you're able to do that with your kiddo, and let him know, hey, we can do something together in the same room, but mommy needs a minute, and you do your thing and I'll do mine. And I think I made some flippant comment about how, well, we don't do any kind of screen time, so I don't know that my kids are very good at doing things on their own because I became their entertainment when they were little.
And just to add to that, it doesn't mean that we're doing screen time every time we do that. It could be, but
yes.
it's just,
and I'm not suggesting that you were.
Yeah.
I was only saying that because I think what I did inadvertently when we didn't do screen time is, instead of like letting my kids just be, I would interact with them probably more than someone who did do screen time, because I was trying to make up for not having that type of entertainment for them. That's the only reason I had mentioned it, I think, at the time. And so that sort of got us talking to, this might be an interesting topic, screen time versus no screen time. So let's talk about it. I mean, I will say this. My husband and I made a decision pretty early on that we did not want our kids to have any kind of screen time, especially when they were young. As my oldest one has gotten older, and when he started school, he started having some screen time. And of course, during the pandemic, he had some screen time because he wasn't at school, and we were in California at the time and everything was shut down. So we got some educational apps and things on the iPad that he was doing. But as a general rule, like, we don't have a TV in the house at all. Just even for the two of us, we don't have television. And that's a decision that we made just because when my son was young, I turned on something. I think it was like Sesame Street or like Baby Einstein or something like that. He was maybe 2.5, 3 years old. He was homesick and I was working, and I just needed him to like be distracted for a minute. And I think the nanny was gone, or I didn't have backup. And when I came out, like, I was watching my kid, who's very, very active, a very active little boy, like extremely expressive. And he was just zoned out on the couch, like almost laying completely flat, just staring at the screen. And it freaked me out, to be honest. And I didn't like it. I didn't like that he had shut off so much of what I knew as his normal personality while watching this, that I turned it off and we never went back. We just sort of made the decision that we didn't want to introduce that until it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah. I like that, we're thinking about broadening it out, not just to talk about screen time for the kiddos, but also for, adults. I think that makes a ton of sense. And then, I've never read or heard or listened to a single piece of scientific evidence or, thought leadership either around screen time. So, everything that I share in this, episode is just going to be based on like what I've, decided to do, as a mom, or just, I guess, as a person, and like my thoughts about it. But again, like I know nothing about what people say about it. And I do believe in kind of keeping my head like tucked away in the sands, like an ostrich sometimes.
Okay.
I don't consume a lot of things. And, with screen time, I think it's become like one of those topics that like we're just so hyper obsessed and hyper focused on, right now, that it's become almost like pop culture to me. So I don't consume that type of stuff. But I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there, and just everything is just all
Well,
completely just
and as a general
what I do.
disclaimer, this podcast, I mean, we're not experts. We might be experts in very specific things because of what we do for work. Um, but we're not experts on any of this. This is a conversation. At some point, we'll probably invite others to join us and interview folks, but like who are the real experts on different things. But for now, it's just literally two moms talking about a variety of different things.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so with screen time, I know that it's, like controversial, and like we want to limit screen time and like, this, that, and the other. But I think it's more about, well, what is screen time? Like what's actually being done with the screen, I do think that like if it's, with your example, Hannah, like when it's, a child, for hours or however long, like just laying there and watching TV, like I don't think that there's any real benefit to
Yeah.
that. Well, there could be, right? When you're like maybe a little older, or like if the baby's sick and that's the only way that you can get them to lay down and rest is to watch something and then hopefully fall asleep so that their body can recover. Like, I don't think that, I think that there is the benefit, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like when it's just like, this baby or this kid, is, healthy and well and could be doing like other things,
Yeah.
um but because the TV's on or because they have an iPad or whatever, they're just sitting there and already learning how to be sedentary.
Yeah.
I do think that that's probably where, there's an issue, and maybe that's the thing that, we want to avoid. But I don't have restrictions when it comes to screen time with my little one. And I think it's because, you know, we've always had like a really healthy balance. Like we go out a lot. Like we like to go out, explore, we like to go play outside and like do, things like that. We both really like nature. So for me, I know like if he's home and if he's, working on a project on on his iPad or on the computer or something like that, it's okay because we're doing other stuff. And then again, it goes back to, well, what are you doing like on that screen? Typically my kiddo is doing something that is helping his mind. He's doing something creative, or he's learning something, or he's researching a topic that he's interested in, or he's learning to code. Whether it's in a game, like he loves Minecraft, so he, learned how to code in it so that he can manipulate the game to what he wants it to be. He's
Mm-hmm.
learned how to create his own mods in there, which is such a, huge skill. There are people that, as adults, like, sell their mods or whatever, or have these,
Right.
huge YouTube channels. And I'm like, kiddo, the fact that you're able to do that at this age, like, I feel like that's giving you an advantage. Learning to code right now,
Mm-hmm.
understanding how a computer thinks, even, letting him watch certain YouTube channels, and him learning how to understand like how the business of YouTube works. And he and I can have a business conversation because he's paying attention and like seeing like, okay, well, this person says you can download a free brush set, like if he's doing Procreate tutorials to enhance his skills with graphic design, right? This
Mm-hmm.
person says that you can download a free brush set, but if we click on this, like, mommy, why is it asking me for my email address? Well, tell me, what do you think?
Yeah.
And it opens
What's the
up like that
business
conversation.
reasoning for that?
Yeah, so like, now he's to the point where he's like, well, I'm gonna, like do YouTube videos, like, and he's still like spinning around because his interests keep changing a little bit.
Yeah.
But then if I do this type of YouTube video, then people will want to buy my product. And I'm like, exactly. Like, and yes, there are a couple of steps
Yeah.
in between, but he was able to figure out, well, content equals sales. And I think that that's something that even adults like who want to tap into this, online like content marketing
Yeah.
like formula, like have such a hard time like with like making that very direct linear correlation. Content equals sales, right? And there's stuff in between, like I said, but I think there's such power in that. I think that there is going to be a lot of tech in the future. Like people,
Yeah.
like there are so many people who are using Chat GPT now, and
That's a
YouTube.
whole different conversation.
Yeah, and Google's AI and like all these other different AIs to do different things. A lot of content creating people, by the, mind you, and a lot of AI has been created around helping with like content and some of that type of stuff. So I just think that the more comfortable and the more of an advantage that my kid can have with the technology and the thing that he's going to need to be a beast at to be successful in the future, I want to give him that advantage now, or give him that opportunity now, so that he does have that advantage in the future. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk said something like that once too, when he was talking about screen time. He was like, well, why wouldn't I want my kids to have an advantage like in the thing that they need to know how to use best?
Right.
And I mean, on one end, I think that it's, unfortunate that we are going so techy, because I value human connection and being able to have, conversation, but that human connection can also happen digitally or virtually. It also opens up like pathways for us to do things like this, like having a podcast and have a
Right.
conversation at 5:54 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it also creates an opportunity for my little one who, doesn't enjoy doing things like going to summer camps. And right now, it wouldn't be safe for him to go to a summer camp and be
Yeah.
around a lot of different germs and kids. It gives him the opportunity to FaceTime his cousin, who they're like besties, and his best friend almost every day, and they play together. It's not just like, oh, I'm sitting here doing nothing on the screen.
Right.
They are playing with their toys together if they have similar toys. So he knows what types of toys or activities him and his best friend have, and
Yeah.
the two of them, like, they'll play that together. And then like his cousin, they have their own specific interests. And let me tell you, like them spending that time together, playing together, when they were like, 4 or 5 and they would try to do that, I would have to intervene often to be like, hey, kiddos, let's talk about respectful language. Let's talk about taking
Yeah.
turns and, intervene to do that. But now I can keep an ear, of course, because you always want to listen and see
Yeah,
what
of course.
they're doing and what they're talking about. But I can keep an ear, but I know I don't have to intervene, because it's so unbelievable to be able to see like how well they respect each other now, because they have had this opportunity to interact, but in a different way. Like they're, want to spend more time in person together. They love that in-person time, but they started doing it when particularly like in COVID, like, his cousin used to come over. I used to pick them both up from school because of some things, right? And they would both come to my house, and they loved that time together. And they would play together and do all the things like every day after school. But that went away when she started going to a different school. So they started, talking a little bit. But then, like, especially during like pandemic time, when that just a little bit of in-person interaction, like maybe a couple times a month, completely went away for a time period.
Yeah.
So it gave them that opportunity to bond better and like really connect and like learn how to make the best of a tricky situation. And
Right.
I think that as adults we struggle with connecting with people digitally, because there is so much digital stuff now. And people feel so much more lonely. But when I look at my kiddo and my niece interacting over FaceTime and having their play dates or eating lunch together over
That's
FaceTime and
cute.
having a conversation, I'm like, no, that is how you leverage technology to build connections and enhance
Yeah.
your relationships.
So
So
I
yeah.
agree with it. I agree with that, like as a concept. And I get it. I think that's a really useful, absolutely benefits of technology is you can connect with people that you can't otherwise see. My kids get to do FaceTime with grandparents that they don't get to see on a regular basis because we don't have any family that lives nearby.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think every kiddo's different.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I love my oldest. He's an incredible human being, but he also, how do I put this? Um, his brain, when it comes to technology, automatically goes to entertainment, not to learning. That's just the way he's built. Um, it's also the way I'm built, but I didn't have technology when I was growing up. So I was forced to read, and I love to read. So like that was, the running joke among my family is that you could always, when I was growing up, you could always find me in the corner with a book. There could be chaos in the room. I was in the corner reading a book. And that's exactly how my son is. And so I was always worried that if I introduced television shows, even YouTube, you can get sucked into like a rabbit hole where you're just watching video after video and you're not really retaining that information. And I wanted for my son that if he's going to get sucked into something, I want it to be a book. I want him reading. I want his eyes to see words because that's going to help with language. I think that when you're reading a book, you're developing your imagination. It sort of makes you think about what you're reading and what that would look like, in a way that watching something on a screen, even if it's, a YouTube educational video, it's not going to give you the same. It's just a different style of learning.
Yeah.
And so I wanted, at least when they're young, because I know that there is no way to completely protect them from technology. I mean, even my oldest is in, he just finished, he's going to be starting second grade, but in his first grade class, they were doing coding in first grade. I mean, I didn't have computers until high school. And even then it was like one, computer lab, and we were learning how to type.
Yeah.
So yeah, so and in first grade they're learning how to code. The teacher has a device, and they have apps, and they're learning how to code, and there's all these games that teach them that. So I know that there's no way to avoid it. But I wanted, at least early on, when they're building those connections, because I had read somewhere that children, like they create the most neural pathways between 0 to 7 years old. Like they do the most amount of learning during those years. And so I wanted that time, 0 to 7 years, to be as screen free as possible, so that there's nothing impeding that development, I guess. And I haven't read a ton of studies. I know, like, I've read news articles, which of course have their own sort of twist, and it's completely depend on the, personal bias of the person writing the article, about sort of technology and whatnot. I don't know whether it impacts people negatively. I do know that for myself, like, even as an adult, there are times where, when I used to watch TV, I don't watch TV anymore. When I used to watch TV, I would get sucked in, and unintentionally end up spending 2-3 hours watching a show or television that I never intended to spend. And part of that could be I wasn't intentional about my time, and I didn't, set a cutoff time. But part of it is also that television can be very addicting, and watching things, even if you're learning, even something like YouTube, where you're sort of trying to learn something, you can very easily get down a rabbit hole where you're just watching entertainment, because it's so available and it's so out there.
Yeah. No, I definitely hear, like, that's probably the, the biggest concern. And, you don't want to teach your child's, like, maladaptive habits, right? Or, behaviors for, for anything. I think, again, that kind of just goes back to, like, being mindful of, well, how much time and, like, what is the quality of that time with whatever the device is that they're interacting with. I'm not, like, I'm a huge reader. Like, when I was younger, that's what I would do. But I know that I didn't start liking to read until the age of 9. I know that I always had to read. I had, like through school, like my mother
Yeah.
didn't really enforce much of that at home. But like through school, like there were like the AR test, like accelerated reader tests
Oh
back
yeah.
in the day and stuff like that. And I wouldn't read the book. I would just take the test and pass it, right? Because I'm a good test taker, and I realized that very early on. But it wasn't until I read a specific book at the age of 9 that I was like, oh wow, this is really good. And then I started becoming like a really avid reader. But up until that point, like, at home,
What
I
was the
spent
book, by the way? I'm sorry.
Silver. It's called Silver. It was about a sled dog and its team and all that fun stuff. Pretty similar to the movie Balto, that
Oh,
kids
nice.
movie
For
from
me,
back
it
in
was
the day.
Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Um, but I think, having that like knowledge, of myself and always remembering that, I and also knowing that even now, if I'm forced to read something, I'm not gonna give it as best of a chance as I could as if I, just picked it up on my own. And that's even as like being like an avid reader now, like somebody who just really likes to read more than watch a movie or whatever. Um, I tried my best not to impose that on my kid. I would try to I would encourage it. Like we would read stories every night, whether it was like a longer like kid novel that I'm reading to him and we like read like a chapter or two every night, or if it was just like little like the little picture book type of stories, the ones that some of them reread over and over and over again, like
Yeah.
Green Eggs and Ham, like we will, like that's quality
That's
time
my
for us.
daughter's
Like
favorite book, or
it's
was for a while.
amazing. Yeah, like that's quality time for us. Like you can read it to me or I'll read it to you because we just love this story. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But my kiddo likes to read only the things he likes to read, and I'm okay with that.
Mm.
I don't force him and say, hey, like, no, you have to read this because reading is good. And if he's and the eyes get tired. Like I know, like I
Yeah.
was big on the Harry Potter series when I was growing up, and like I would really just want to keep going with them because I really just enjoyed them, and they're pretty thick books. But when the eyes get tired, I'm not actually picking up that stuff either. Like you
Yeah.
can be reading, but you can have the same problem with reading as you do with watching a TV. Like, and that's when you just realize you're reading the same sentence or paragraph over and over again, and you have no clue what it says, right?
Yeah.
You
No,
know, as
100%. But I think not but. I shouldn't say but. I'd say 100%. And I think the difference though is with screens, like I notice it when I'm reading a book on my phone as opposed to a hard copy book, right? It weakens your eye muscles significantly more looking at a screen than it does a page on a book. 100% the eyes get tired, but I mean, my understanding from what I had read is that the screen strains your eyes more just
well,
because our brains aren't wired to work that way yet.
and that probably makes sense, like because of all the light and stuff coming in. I know for me, I've always like if I'm using a screen, I've always had to put it really dim
Mm-hmm.
because I don't like all that light, sensory input going into like my eyes so directly. And even at work, like when I worked in different jobs, people would be like, why are your screens so dark? And I'm like, it helps my eyes.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's maybe that reason. Again, I don't know about that stuff, and I don't look at it from that perspective. Um, but I think it makes logical sense that that would happen. But I guess like my point with what I was saying, like with the reading and just not like I guess forcing it,
Mm.
is because I want my kid to read for joy, not
Yeah.
because it's
Fair
something that
enough.
he has to do, and I just don't feel like um forcing it. And from my perspective, and it sounds like it worked good with your kiddo because
It
he'll read, but I went at it from a standpoint of like, well, I just
yeah.
want you to have that experience that I had. I wanted you like him to find that book that like just made this such a magical experience.
Yeah.
And he did, and he found that series that he just like, loves and is excited for the release of them. And we have that now, like, which is what I had with Harry Potter, like, growing up. And he has that with the Dragon Master series now. And he's, avidly waiting for the next one to come out on August 1st, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, well, cool, mission accomplished there.
Yeah.
With
I
that. And
and
I
I
think
think
there are a
that
couple of different ways to do it. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I think that goes to I think what we talked about earlier, which is every kid's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's up to the parents to really understand like what is going to benefit my child the most.
Yeah.
Where in I don't think there's any shame in saying, look, my kid has these strengths, my kid has these weaknesses. Like, if there's very real, there's a truth to the fact that different kids have different personalities and are going to gravitate towards different things in different ways.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, like, we got lucky, I guess, that for my son, he's always been an avid reader. Like, before he could read, we were reading to him, obviously. But as soon as he started to be able to read, like, he just took to it. And so, like, when he gets into like a series, we see other kids walking with screens, he's walking with a book, like, and he's into
Yeah.
the book, he
And
loves to
my
read
kid's
it.
walking with both.
Yeah.
and a sketchbook. Like,
Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So yeah, so like, but even for my 3-year-old, even when my son does, he does do some screen time now, because there are apps available through the school with, like, there's a broader reading library where he could get books through this app, or there's like science or math work that teachers have uploaded and made available through these different applications. So he does access that on occasion. But even for my youngest, my 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old, like, they haven't watched movies with us, for example. Like, we don't use screen time as downtime. It's not, it's a tool. So when we do like YouTube, it's educational. It's because somebody had a question about space. And so my husband found a video of the astronauts in the International Space Station doing a tour of the space station, talking about what life is like up in space. So they watched that because they had this question about what it was like up in space, right? Or as you said, using YouTube, for example. Like, my son is very into Legos, very, very much into Legos. And we talk a lot with them, even now, even at an early age, that look, like, there are different ways to build a business. My husband has his own business. I have my chronic side hustles. I work for a company. There's different ways to sort of build a life that you can take care of. We talk about money, which we discussed before, but how you get it, how you earn it. And so I started a YouTube channel for my son, and he named it. And we haven't posted in a while, but we record him building his Lego sets and put it up. And the idea isn't like, here, let's help you make money or build a business. It's, hey, if you like doing Legos, you can figure out a way to build a life for yourself doing anything you enjoy. Like, there are no limitations anymore. If you want to be a hairdresser, you can be a hairdresser and still be very successful, as long as you're at least aware of the different tools that are now available to you.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's, really, really important to introduce that. I think ultimately it depends on what you want to accomplish when it comes to our, like, raising our kiddos. And for me, I want to really foster and nurture the skill of being intentional in my child. I think that's the most important thing that I want to, because that's something that I've always, like, has always been one of my strengths. Like, I had to do a lot of thinking um you know, at one point to be like, what is really my strength? You know, because I mean, I've been good at things. Um, and I was, you know, decent, like very good in school and stuff like that. So I'm like, I don't know, I'm smart, but that's, you know, that's not really a strength, you know, that's just a quality, right? So, but like the one thing like I've always been very, very good at, and it's always, you know, kind of been a challenge to fully connect with people, because we don't necessarily see eye to eye on on this specific thing, especially like my contemporaries growing up, is being intentional. If I don't think that something makes sense, I'm not going to do it. Or
Mhm.
if I am letting myself, you know, have some escapism time, whether that's with a movie or, you know, for me, it's usually watching a space documentary or reading a book. Um, then I am setting that time for a reason and only for a specific amount. Um,
Mm.
and I'm learning how like and it's about like juggling it amongst like all the other things. It's putting a priority, but that escapism time to me is really, really important. And I do agree with you that, you know, we're all different people. And that's, you know, from birth and, you know, onward, like we all have like different things, you know, in our personality and our genetic makeup that are going to make us predisposed for certain activities. So if we have addictive personalities, then, you know, addiction can come in a lot of different ways. You can become
Yeah.
an addicted to books, you know, just as much as you can become addicted to some of the, you know, less adaptive substances
Right.
or things, right? um and I just think that it's all about that. Like for me, I think I pay a little bit more attention to my kid knowing why you don't want to just sit around all day like watching a screen and doing nothing, and being able to make the choice not to do that, then completely removing the stimulus. Because
Mm.
to me, I feel like that's how I'm going to give him an opportunity to, you know, continue making those intentional and hopefully like self-serving, and not in a selfish way, but like,
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
better
I understand.
decisions. Okay, I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that came out wrong.
No,
Um, but
self-serving is, it's not a negative word.
it
People
can
just add some sort of
connotations,
connotation to it, but the
exactly.
reality is
So
it means to serve yourself. That doesn't
yes,
mean you're doing it at the
exactly.
expense of others.
Yes, exactly. And connotation, we can totally do a whole thing about
Yes, we
connotations as
can.
well. Oh my gosh. So um but yeah, like I think that's um how I approach it and how I've always approached it, because for me, like even though I love to read, I don't necessarily think that there is, and I know that this is not correct. I know that there are things that people can tell me that are going to be like, well, this and this, right? But I don't necessarily think that I need to make my kid be like a super reader, in order to be able to be successful in life. I think it's a quality and a skill that I want him to know how to do, both for enjoyment but for also like enhancing and growing himself. I want him to know that that's something available, but it doesn't have to be the thing. If that's not, because again, we are all different. Like
Hmm.
growing up, like, yeah, I would be like the person reading a book. Like we would go be driving down to Miami to visit family, and I would bring, about 10 books with me, and my siblings would bring zero. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
we're each successful in our own ways. And again, like, yes, I have this intention thing, and I operate differently than my siblings in like a lot of different areas, but they are successful like in their own right without being like a reader. Like my brother is super duper successful and intentional when it comes to his money. You know what I mean? And he's not book smart. Like he hates school, so he never like did
Yeah.
amazingly well in it. But give him like a math problem or like a real life application to figure out, and he can do it like this. And I love talking about business strategy with him. And, he's, starting up his own business and stuff like that too, right now. And that's always been like our thing, like, is talking about stuff like that together, and playing video games. He and I used to play video games together for hours growing up, you know. And then like my sister, like, she is incredibly like book smart, but she's also like really practical, and she's like really amazing like as a leader in the corporate world, you know what I mean? Because she knows how to just like, cut to the point, like trim out all the nonsense and like get to the point. And that's where she and I relate, because I'm like, yeah, like that's so it. So even though like I was like this big reader, and they did spend a little bit more time with screens, my brother would also write and do things like that. We've all been able to kind of carve our own path. And I think that that's more what I wanted to introduce with my little one is, here are the different ways you can learn. Here are the different ways that you can, gather information. Here are the different paths that you can go. Now it's up to you to test all of them over and over again to continue to see what makes the most sense for you, how you learn the best, how you feel relaxed the best too, if it's one of the escapism avenues.
Yeah.
And then also like be reassessing that like as you get older, because it's gonna change.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess I just never had the intention or the thought to be like, yeah, I had the thought, like I wanted him to be a good reader because I know it's important. And I just wanted, him to love books because mommy loves books. And I'm okay with him just like loving, what he likes, like, the things. And I'm okay with him being willing to read like, things to learn about animals and stuff like that, like, things that are specific to his interest. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I wanted to encourage, is that intentionality.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense. And I think this is why it's sort of a big thing for a lot of people now, is because it's so easy and accessible, like technology. I think almost every single person has a television in their home. Every single person has some sort of other screen with access to the internet. And, there's this whole new world that has opened up and access to information that wasn't available when a lot of the people who are now parents were younger.
Yeah. Well, and I do remember like having TV growing up, and, sitting watching TV, and, playing video games. Like we had PlayStation, we had Nintendo, we had Dreamcast, we had all of the different things.
I did not have all of that growing up.
See, and
I'm a little bit ahead of you in terms of, or behind you, I guess, because when I was growing up, there was no internet when I was growing up. Like it just didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, computers came out like in my lifetime, so yeah, like, but, and I remember that, but yeah, I think you're just a few years older than I am.
Yeah.
But we did, do those things. And I think also too, like I want my kid to just be a child, right now.
Yeah.
Because life is challenging, and there's a lot. And I wish I had enjoyed my childhood a little bit more. I do remember being more in a rush to grow up, just because
I think that's almost everybody though.
Yeah, but
different discussion.
Yeah,
we can have that
that
discussion, but I think that's the majority of people feel like they were in a rush.
Yeah, in different ways too. Like I remember enjoying certain aspects of my childhood, but I always like, was like, oh, I just want to be able to do this, this, and this. But
right.
like with
I
my
want to be
kiddo,
a grown up.
Yeah, like with my kiddo, I say to him, I'm like, please just enjoy your childhood. I'm like, this is the time for you to just do nothing for a whole day if you don't want to. Because guess what? When you're an adult, I want you to take those days for yourself still too. Do nothing, because that is okay. That's, self-care, like we just talked about in a previous episode. It is okay to take rest. Like, especially like here in American society, it's all about the hustle and the go, go, go. It's all about like, let's how do we get the advantage? Like, how do we, make something out of something? It's okay to just do nothing. It's okay to just do something simply to escape and like let our minds have a rest. And I try to encourage that with my kiddo too. Like, it's important to be well-rounded, be active, make sure you get your exercise, learn stuff and, hone your craft, but also just be a kid, goof off, like why
Mhm.
not? And that's why too, like I've not been like too big on, you know putting my kiddo into like a full day like daycare type of thing, or
Yeah.
daycare after school, is because I just want you to be a kid. I don't want you to like already get into that like Monday through Friday, 8 to 5
Mindset.
type
Yeah.
of mindset, because it's silly to me, honestly. Like that is how we function in our society. And I know it's necessary, and there's no shade on like putting kids in daycare, because then
I
there's the
mean, both my kids
socialization, and
have
there's,
that
yeah,
because
like
I
there's
work
this.
and I work
Well,
for a company, right? You work for
same.
yourself, but
Me too, though. Like when I worked in corporate, I still
yeah.
didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like I
Okay.
figured out other avenues. You know what I
Mm.
mean? I would leave work in the middle of the day and sit my butt in the car line or at the park to pick up my kid. And I said to my boss, my managing director, this is what's important. If you have a problem with the fact that I'm taking 2 to 2.5 hours in the middle of the day, I'm walking away. You know?
Mm.
Because I don't care. My kid is my priority. So I hear what you're saying, and that's why I wanted to say like there's no shade, because I know that some people like are not going to be that bold or can't be because they can't be without that income source, right? Like I know that. Um but I didn't do it like then either, like because it is something that like I do feel like strongly about, like
Yeah.
and then I would work at night, like overnight, um in order to like make up the work that I missed.
Right.
But yeah, like I just try my very best, not. And that was always one of the reasons that for me I wanted to be self-employed too, because I wanted to be able to like do some homeschooling or like different things like that, like with my kiddo. So I adjusted and chose to carve a different path because I wanted to give something different to my kiddo,
Mm.
when it comes to the self-employment and stuff like that. But yeah, like I think, I'm okay like with you just vegging out sometimes, because sometimes I want to veg out, like, and I'm
Oh,
not gonna give myself a hard time like if I want to do that, whether that's with a book or with a movie. And I absolutely love going to the movies with my kiddo, like that is, and we have.
I will say that's the one thing I miss about us doing like no TV is that I love watching movies. I don't watch them that much anymore because
Hmm.
they're not, it just doesn't serve me. Um,
Yeah, I
but I love like older movies and kids movies and stuff. And I miss being able to like watch, be able to see my kids enjoy those. But at the same
yeah,
time, like this whole idea of vegging out, like, yes, even as adults, sometimes we need downtime. But I have always worried about like teaching that as something for my kids to do, like something to do as opposed to something they need as a tool to be able to get through, like to get to what they want to accomplish. Because we
yeah,
have limited time on this earth, right? Like no matter what you do, how well you take care of yourself, we're all going to the same place. Like there's a
yeah,
guaranteed end to this life, right?
yeah.
There's
And
no like mystery or surprise for how it's going to turn out. And so I guess to me, like, and this is part of like what my mind shifted. Like, I want to spend my life doing things, experiencing things. I don't want to look back and say like, oh, like I wasted hours of my day doing something that didn't bring me enjoyment, or that I didn't, that like was mindless. And I'm the complete opposite of you. For a long time, I was not intentional at all about anything I did. I was just kind of sort of fly by the seat of my pants, like, oh, this seems interesting. Let's do it. Let's try it, type of thing. It took me a long time to sort of learn and think about like intentional. And even now, I still struggle with doing things. I can do things more intentionally, like business wise or work wise, but personally, it's been more of a learning process for me. It didn't come naturally. And so I want for my children that their baseline or go to isn't that, and isn't sort of, oh, I'll take a, lazy day or whatever. It's that their baseline is, oh, I'm reading, I'm, doing an activity, I'm figuring something out.
Yeah, and I think that's all, that's in the conversation. I mean, I think that, if your if your kiddo is more inclined to kind of
Veg
just
out.
veg out,
Yeah,
then
definitely is.
they're still going to do that when they're adults, until they
Yes,
have
but then maybe they'll
something.
feel guilty enough about it that they won't do it as often.
Well,
I
maybe,
mean,
or
I'm being facetious, but
yeah, but maybe, like, it's not so much as like removing this thing, because then when they get into it when adult, like as an adult, like, maybe that'll have like a rebound effect, and like it'll only like accentuate, that quality in them, because now like they're, and I don't
fair
I don't
enough.
know. I don't know, but I'm
Neither of
just,
us do, right?
yeah, I'm just saying, like,
And our
that's,
parents didn't know either, right?
yeah, and like that's kind of how I think about it, and why I focus on the like intention, and having the conversations and saying, well, if you want something, you have to put the work into it,
Yeah.
and um and making sure that, like, again, it's like my kiddo is rarely just gonna sit down and watch a movie and not do something else. Like,
Yeah.
we do have, a couple of TVs in the house here, but the one downstairs in the family room doesn't even get turned on. The only one that does get turned on is the one that's in my little one's room, and that's only so that he can have some sound at nighttime before he goes to bed. And he turns, like, he doesn't even face it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So we have it there, but it barely gets touched. Or, even if it's on in the background, or typically, like, he'll put his iPad on in the background if he wants music or something while he's
Yeah.
playing or working on
And
something
that
else.
makes sense.
And I'm like, I'm all for that, because I do the same thing. I get my best work done if I have some music on, or
Mm.
if or sometimes it's listening to a podcast, depending on what I'm working on, but I like to have music on.
Yeah.
So, it's like different things like that. But I think it's like, well, how do we have the conversation to say? And then, when they're getting to a place where it's like, okay, well, maybe a little intervention is needed, it's like, hey, like, you do realize that
You've been on the
the
screen
more,
for however
yeah, or
long.
like, yeah, that, like, so it's like, okay, I'm taking this for a minute, like, go do something else, and I've done that with my kiddo before too, like in
Yeah.
his younger years, before he, was able to, have that more abstract thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
um but I think that, um I don't know, I just don't want to completely remove it. And that's with anything. Like,
Yeah.
I don't put like hard and fast restrictions. Instead, I teach why. And I'm like, hey, like, when it comes to like eating certain foods and stuff like that, like, hey, like, maybe, that fast food stuff tastes good, but no, we're not going to eat it often. We're not going to not eat it at all,
Hmm.
but we're not going to eat it often at all. Like, maybe every other month, maybe once a month, at most. The reason being that, and we'll go into that. And, oh, yes, you need to brush your teeth twice a day. The reason being is that once you have your permanent teeth, if you don't take care of them, you'll lose them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like different things like that. Like, oh, you're not going to have too much sugar. You're not going to have none at all, but you're not going to have too much because it ain't good for you. And here's why.
Yeah.
And I want him to be able to think like that, and understand, like, I need to abstain, or like, avoid like certain things, or like exercise moderation even more on certain things, so that I am good to go. You know what I mean? or so that I'm, taking care of myself the best.
Yeah.
I don't drink alcohol. I used to, but it's something that one, from a mental health standpoint, like I don't think it's the best thing for my mental health personally.
Yeah.
And two, like from, a body standpoint, as, I started getting older and the hormones and all the shifts and stuff, inflammation, and then also, red wine, which I used to love wine a lot, is one of my triggers for migraines. So for me, I was like, okay, well, there is literally, and I also just see like no point to it. Like, why do you need to get drunk? Like for me, I was always just like, well, 1 or 2 glasses of wine, I don't want to feel buzzed. I don't want to get drunk. I just like the taste of it. But I've never seen a point in getting drunk or anything like that. So I'm not going to do it. But I don't drink anymore. And my son has seen me drink alcohol, and now he sees that I don't drink alcohol. And we've had conversations about it too. Of like, well, no, mommy doesn't drink. I want you to know what alcohol is. I don't want to hide it from you. I want you to know what that is. I want you to know, why it matters that you don't touch it until the age of 21 with the whole brain chemistry and development and all that stuff. I also want you to know that, like, when he's older, I'll have the conversation that, like, obviously mommy did drink before 21, you know what I mean? And different things like that, so that he knows that he has a safe place to go if he ever gets into something like that.
Yeah.
I'm obviously not going to tell him that now.
Of course not.
But then he like also sees that now I don't drink, and mommy makes a choice not to because there's no point in it and stuff like that. And he'll say, well, I'm not going to drink when I get older either. I'm like, buddy, you don't know that. I'm like, maybe you, like, when you're older, you make that decision. Okay. Like, you see what works for you. You know what I mean? But he sees both sides, and he knows that he has the power to make that decision, and why, I guess, like on all of the different things. So I don't know.
Well, and that actually leads to, we'll do a podcast on this another time, because I think we're running a little long here, but about like how honest we should be with our kids, or how straightforward, because I think that's something a lot of parents struggle with. Something I struggle with, because I tend to lean towards more honest and more straightforward. Like, if my kid asks me a question, my go-to is to be very direct and say, look, this is the reality. It's not something I do, it's not something your dad does, but this is, some people do this, and here's why we don't, type of thing. About a variety of different topics. My husband, on the other hand, tends to veer towards protection. So in his mind, he's protecting our children by not exposing them to certain things that they don't need to be exposed to, which is, I totally understand that viewpoint, very valid.
So many like good,
there's a lot
good
of things we
that
can
come
talk
from
about.
that. Like,
and there's a lot of things
from the protection side.
Right. Well, and we'll talk about that in another episode, because this one that's veering away from this topic.
Like, we'll definitely chat about that, shielding versus not.
Basically what we've uncovered in our discussion is that there's no right way to parent. There's no like, yes, you should, or no, you shouldn't do screen time. It's, you got to know your kid. You got to know what you like as a parent, like what works for you and your family. I know some families that have like a television running all the time in the background, and those kids don't really pay attention to it, and they just like play, and it's background noise. And there's definitely people for whom that would not work, because they get more sucked into like the stimulation that comes from a screen. It just completely depends on personality and family. But still a very interesting discussion. I'm sure this is not the last time we'll talk about it, as our kiddos get older and different things, happen in the world, and the technology changes, as it is doing so quickly now.
Yep, I definitely agree. And I the only thing I would add to that is that, I think we can all just, kind of lead by example. One of my biggest things as being a parent, I've mentioned it on a couple of episodes, is not being a hypocrite. That's one of the things that I strive strive like to not be. And that's not even just as a parent, like it's as a person in general.
Yes.
I
Do as
just
I do, not as I say.
not as oh my gosh, I know. I do not like that opposite one where it's
Oh,
do as I
I
say,
don't.
not as I do. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Like why?
No, I mean, I think there's a
So-
reason why that phrase actions speak louder than words, because they do.
Yes.
It's
yeah.
easy to say things, 100 times harder to actually practice what
do
you
it.
preach.
Yes, exactly. So I think, with that, like it's, if screens are like important to you, like if you're using them like as, a parent a lot, but then you're telling your kids that they can't, I think that there's a little bit of, could be miscommunication there, right? And
Yeah.
it's about like, well, what's important to you, like as a person, like you said, getting to know your kids, and then it's figuring out, well, what value do I want to bring to my child, or what message like do I want to set, and am I willing to also adjust my habits to show them that this is the truth and this is important. I think that that's also really really important to do that too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Bye.